Well, there's never a quiet day in cricket. The Sky Cricket podcast this week is being recorded on the day Bangladesh have achieved a historic test win in Pakistan, a historic series win for them there. And on the day, Nas, that Rob Key has decided to unify the test and white ball roles again by appointing Brendon McCullum from early 2025, January 2025, to the white ball role. So plenty to discuss. Let's jump straight in to McCullum. I mean, a bit of a surprise, if only because looking at him during the test match, he wasn't giving much away, was he? He was sat on that balcony with his feet up, looking like the happiest man in the world with his role currently. But he must have known by then he'd already agreed to do both jobs.
He doesn't strike me as someone that would have been jumping around anyway. Is he? Just that's how he is. When we see him in the white ball stuff, even if it's a World Cup final, I reckon he'll be sat there with his feet up like that. So I think it's a good appointment. He's the best man for the job. He's shown that in Test match cricket. In fact, when the first appointments were being made a few years ago, when Rob Key had to decide, it was almost like that was where they were going to go with McCullum in the white ball stuff. And McCullum actually said it was the Test match side that actually intrigued him more. So Rob Key's done well to persuade him. I know both Rob Key and you have had reservations about giving the job to one person, both jobs, because you don't get the best candidates if you make it all year round and you don't split it. Well, I'm afraid they have got the best candidate here. You can't argue that. But B, obviously, because of lifestyle and being away from family, some people just don't want to do it. So I think Rob Key's done well to convince McCullum. Have you changed your mind? Because you were a little bit anti one person being able to do both white ball and red ball cricket as a coach.
Yeah, well, as you say, if you remember when Rob Key made those appointments back in May 2022, he appointed McCullum to the test role, not to the one-day role. He himself said that he thought one man doing both jobs was nigh on impossible. I think that was his quote. And if you look to the schedule, that is true. It has been nigh on impossible. There's been times when the test match team, I think when England went to New Zealand last time for a test tour, test match series finished and they were playing in Bangladesh the next day. Now, in his appointment, he makes the point that the schedule is eased a bit from 2025, the start of 2025 onwards. There aren't those crossovers that there were. But I still think it is a challenge. That is going to be the big challenge. I don't doubt Brendon McCullum's credentials at all, but the challenge will be just the extra responsibility, the extra time that takes to plan and prepare and get a one-day team ready to play. And you're probably going to have to be doing that at times while a test tour or test team is playing. So I think a couple of things. One, I think it'll make the people around him very important. People like Marcus Trescothick, who's going to be the interim coach, obviously, for this Australia series, white ball series at the end of the summer. People like that who will presumably step in from time to time. That's how India have done it, isn't it? They've had one man doing both, Rahul Dravid, until recently, but others have stepped in from time to time to give the head coach a break. I think one of the key things is, as you said, when he took the test job, he said he thought the one-day job was a bit of a cushy role because that was going so well under Owen Morgan, and the test team was intriguing, to use your words, or more of a challenge. And that's almost flipped now. So I think the challenge of the one-day role has intrigued him again. And also from Rob Key's perspective, he started to move on from the Owen Morgan golden generation. He's picking some of these bright young talents in the English game, like Bethel and Mosley, Josh Hull, who's across all squads. And I think he wants McCullum's kind of influence brought to bear on some of these really good young players right at their start of their international careers. That's when you can shape and mold players, isn't it? Right at the start, when they're still kind of open to the outside influence, when they're still soaking it all in, eager to learn and eager to change. That's when you can have the most influence on a young player. So right at the start now, as we move on from Morgan's generation, I think Key wants McCullum to bring that influence to bear. And obviously the white ball role now intrigues him in a way that it didn't 2 years ago, because they're in need of the kind of regeneration that the test team needed 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the upsides are obviously also constant messaging. You can imagine that white ball side and squad having exactly the same messaging as the red ball side now, and there will be people on in all the squads, all three squads, that won't go from one to the other and be comparing like they may have been doing what was McCullum's laid back, relaxed but tough stance compared to Matthew Mott's tough, sort of little bit more laid back and not in your face stance on how to be a coach. So the constant messaging across, I think, is an absolute upside. There's no comparisons of coaches and how do we do it in the red ball side and how do we do it in the white ball side. You know our coach, the captains might be slightly different, but you know our coach, you know how we're going to go about it. The one thing I'd like is to try and keep, if possible, is the freshness. Everyone talks about the freshness of players, but sometimes when you're losing World Cups, like the white ball side have been, it's been quite nice to come and have Stokes and McCullum, who weren't part of that recent World Cup, and they're fresh and ready to go and say, "This is us now."
That's the point I was making about the schedule. I mean,
Yeah.
Rob's right. It does ease from 2025, but it might ease. It's still going to be a challenge, isn't it? Just because
Well,
of the amount.
there's two Ashes. There's a
Yeah.
50 over World Cup, a Champions Trophy. Do you know what I mean? I just want someone to be, and that's your point, is that he's going to have to use Marcus and various other people's. I want Brendon McCullum to turn up to everything he does with freshness and a good mindset that he seems to, spread throughout any team. So if they lose an Ashes, you don't want to then go into a white ball where McCullum is weighed down by all the external noise. Not that it seems to affect him, but it must affect everyone. You go back to Duncan Fletcher, David Lloyd, all our previous coaches, the sort of rotation of Ashes, then World Cup, you could see leading into World Cups, an Ashes loss, and they felt like they were on the edge. So I'm sure if anyone can, Brendon can. I don't think you can doubt his credentials as a coach. I think he's already proved that in English cricket and in franchise cricket.
And the key thing will be Jos Buttler, won't it? This appointment wouldn't have been made clearly if Jos Buttler was not all in as well. And the hope is that in the same way that England's test team under Chris Silverwood and Joe Root had started to look burdened for obvious reasons around COVID, but also the burden of winning one match in 17. And suddenly, McCullum and Stokes took over, and there's a spring in their step, there's a freshness about their play and a kind of joy and uninhibitedness about their play. Rob will be hoping that transmits to Jos Buttler, who sometimes looks a bit burdened with the white ball captaincy, and he'll be hoping that the McCullum way, which he's not a technical coach at all, he's a people person. That's essentially what he is. He'll be hoping those kind of skills, those people skills, rub off on Jos Buttler and make him look a little less burdened around the role.
Yeah, but make no mistake, we've seen McCullum, and he portrays this sort of laid back, let people go out and express themselves sort of mentality. But I've been in and around the team and actually watched him. He is absolutely, what's his saying? Live for today, but plan for the future. He absolutely does that. So he will be planning from January. Before January, he's not taking the role. That will be first tour will be India, then the Champions Trophy. He will be start planning how he wants that white ball side and Jos in particular to take it on. He'll be planning about whether he wants. You did an excellent interview with Marcus of the Test match, and it sounded like Marcus and the team were a little bit more open for Jos, maybe not to keep in every single game. See how it goes with Phil Salt or Jamie Smith or whoever. So he'll already, after this next Test match, when he goes back, he'll be planning various things for that white ball side. We wish him well because it's a tough gig, and that's the other thing Rob has said. At times with the split coaches, he's had to, prioritize one format over the other. He's probably over prioritized Test matches and taken his eye off white ball cricket. Now that you have one coach across both, you will feel that the priorities will lay even across all formats. That is easier said than done, though, Ath, with the schedule.
I mean, in the past, when England have split the roles, it hasn't worked that well. There was Andy Flower and Ashley Giles about 10 years ago, wasn't it, when they split the roles? And obviously more recently with McCullum and Mott. But I don't necessarily think it was because the individuals didn't get on or clashed or whatever, just that the schedule and the formatting is such that often your best players, whether it's Peterson 10 years ago or whether it's Stokes now, the coaches of the various teams want their best players in their team. But as you say, the ultimate man in charge, in this case, Rob Key, has had to be prioritising. When McCullum came into the Test match team, it was the Test match team that needed more love and care and attention. But when Joe Root was captain, England were, planning for that 2019 World Cup and under Owen Morgan. It was often Joe Root who had to take second fiddle with some of the players that he wanted. So it is not easy doing it across formats, given the amount of Test cricket that England play. Often they do play more Test cricket than certainly Sri Lanka, West Indies, New Zealand, the teams that just play largely 2 Test match series. So it'll be a challenge, but yeah, we wish him well. And there's no question that, Rob Key will feel he's got the man he wants, because you sense that there's a very strong affinity within that leadership group at the moment. Stokes, McCullum, Key for the Test match team. They do seem very, very well aligned. And as you know from your days with Duncan Fletcher, that is a big help.
What did you make? What did you make of the Test match last few days? Now you've written on it, and the low crowds on day 4. What's your overriding feeling of it?
Yeah, I mean, that was the story that came out, really, wasn't it? But England won on day 4 in front of maybe 8,000-9,000 Lords that looked a third full. So in a way, that slightly dominated the headlines a bit more than England's win. And another win, 5th consecutive win, 2nd series win of the summer. Only last time they won all their Test matches in the summer was 2004, 20 years ago, when they were building up to the 2005 Ashes. So they have a chance to complete that. So first of all, another excellent performance, bit of a one-sided game. But the low crowds, I thought, was an interesting story, because primarily the focus was on price of tickets, and 95 quid was the cheapest, and is very steep for a 4th day when it was going to be a one-sided game and pretty much everybody knew what the result was going to be. But as we both talked before, it's not only price, is it? All the other issues are kind of brought to bear, because if you're charging top dollar, if you're trying to charge top dollar, people want to see really competitive, high-quality Test cricket. And the Test cricket we've seen this summer, you'd be pushed to say it's been high quality and competitive. It's been a bit one-sided. And that then, filters into all the reasons that we've talked about: the scheduling, the formatting, the lack of prep, teams and players turning up a bit cold. And then when you're trying to charge 95 quid for a 4th day, when it might not even go into a 4th day, and you're not sure what the situation is going to be by then, you can see why people are reluctant. And it's an irony, isn't it? Because, certainly I think you agree, this is the most watchable England team of my lifetime. And because of that, and because they're winning so quickly, people are a bit more reluctant to pre-plan their 4th day. And that's certainly very understandable.
It is definitely a combination of all the things you've discussed there. But I think the overriding thing, the thing I've seen most on social media or on the bottom of your column you wrote the other day, is the pricing of those tickets. So, if you've got a family like me, say I want to take my 2 lads or whatever, that's 300 quid. Then you got travel, you got food. It's not a cheap place or whatever. So, as you say, that the first Lord's Test went into an hour of day 3. So if you're online going and it goes day 3, day 4 tickets, I don't think Sri Lanka are going to take it into day 4. So you don't get those. So it's whether they can have some flexibility on that pricing, but also maybe a bit of overkill. I mean, don't forget the 100. There were quite a few empty stands in the 100 as well. Old Trafford was low, Edgbaston was low. The 2 London 100 crowds were pretty good, actually, Lords and the Oval. Is it just a bit of overkill, the amount of cricket? You can't go to every game.
That was the 21st international of the summer. That's men's and women's games. But if you go back, and one hesitates to hark back to when we played, but you'd have 5 Tests and 3 Texaco Trophy games. Of course, those days have long gone. But 21 games, with still 9 games to come for the men. There's still the Oval Test, 5 ODIs against Australia, and 3 T20s. So that'll be 30 international matches across the men's and women's team by the end of the summer. So I think that's another factor. So I think it's just a combination of factors, which starts principally, as you say, with price. But then people are saying, well, okay, at that price, what am I getting? What am I getting for that? And that combination made many reluctant to come, which was a shame because.
So should we be worried? The narrative could develop very quickly into, even in England, Test match cricket is dying. Is this the beginning, or is this just a blip where the MCC didn't read the room and just got it slightly wrong?
Well, I don't think it's that people are falling out of love with Test cricket, but it's a warning sign around the volume of it, the quality of it, and the pricing of it. And I think that's definitely a warning sign for those three things, sure. But I think it would be wrong to say that suddenly people are falling out of love with Test cricket. I don't think that is the case
No, I agree.
at all.
I agree.
So, I mean, it finished, barely a third full, which was a shame because it was another dominant performance. And Gus Atkinson, he must think is the easiest game in the world right now. 10 for in his first game there, 12 wickets, 100 at the start of this game, and then 5 for to finish it off. I mean, this is Atkinson's summer.
It is, and not in a way, I mean, no one can have those stats without being exceptional, but not in a sort of bully, I actually think in a highly skilled way. And I particularly note the 100. When we watched him bat and get the 100, there were some shots in there that if you had never watched a game of cricket before, or never watched England play rather, and you just saw that, you'd think, well, here's a top 5 batter. The positions he was getting in, front foot, back foot, pull shot, spin, running down the wicket twice. I think Root called him Jacques Callis. Like, I'm not so sure about that, but hitting it over long off for 6, cover drive, off drive to get to 100. But the bowling, the discipline in line and length and control, he obviously loves that pavilion end. But the speeds are slightly down as the games have progressed. It was high 80s to start, and it's low 80s, but still, low to mid 80s and ending.
Yeah, he actually upped it a bit in that second innings when he got the wickets, didn't he? He was down in the first innings on pace, and then seemed to find another bit of energy in the second innings.
Yeah, would you play him the Oval? I mean, he's at top of his game, home ground. Some people are saying look after him. His speeds have been slightly down. I'd err towards playing, but these bowlers are such valuable assets.
They are valuable, but England have been winning in good time. They've got an extra day off because of that. I think home ground, he must be feeling on cloud 9 at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think whilst the going is good, because England are playing 5 bowlers as well, with then the bits and pieces like Dan Lawrence and Joe Root, there's plenty of bowling there. It's not as though they're going to have to, tear Gus Atkinson for 30 overs in an innings. So I think,
Right, I'm going to ask you a question now, because you do that paper review and you become like Ian Ward. You just ask the questions. You don't answer any. And you gave me abuse on that as well, by the way, saying I was the most selfish cricketer you've ever played with. There was no need for that.
There, but not far off.
Yeah. And don't waffle in this. Is Joe Root the greatest England batsman that has ever played the game in Test match cricket?
That has ever played the game?
Yeah, have you seen? Sorry, that you have seen. You're what, 56? That you have seen is Joe. Who's better than Joe Root at Test match cricket for England?
He's the best England batter that I've seen, going back to, I suppose, the early and mid 1980s. Just when I started watching as a boy. Not that I had any particularly critical faculties at that point to compare or contrast, but the 4 I mentioned usually are. From my boyhood. And as you know, the players you see in your formative years and who you play with right at the start of your career often have an outsized influence on your memory, just because, you are so fresh and new to it. So I always think of Gooch and Gower at the start of my career.
I'll always go Hammond and Hobbs there or something.
I always hold Gooch and Gower in high regard, just because I was 21 coming into that England dressing room, and they were heroes and legends. And then Peterson and Root, they're the 4 that I would put slightly above the others. And of those 4, I think Joe is the best that I've seen. with that one quibble that we talked about on the paper review about that 100 in Australia, which he'll hope to knock off next time he goes down under. But a remarkable player, how he keeps doing it, keeps coming to every game. He's so consistent, wonderful player of spin. Don't think that maybe the quality of the fast bowling is quite at the moment what it might have been, say, when Graham Gooch was playing. But how do you compare these things? And certainly I have no facility to compare, to Hutton and Hammond and Compton and all these wonderful players. I just don't know how you do that. So all you can go is in what you've seen. I mean, the guy who had watched England cricket since the 1930s, who was one of the previous Times cricket correspondents, John Woodcock, who didn't die that long ago. I chatted to him, and he'd seen them all since the 30s. And Root was right up in his little group, but he did have Compton at the top. And I guess just because he was a young boy in the 40s when Compton was, carrying all before it. So the time in life that you see these players often, I think, influences how you view them. But what a beautiful player he is to watch. That's the other thing, I think. People forget sometimes that cricket is an aesthetic game. Sometimes they say it doesn't matter how it looks. It's about how many. And that is true. That is true come the bottom line. But I still think if you are a beautiful player to watch, as Root is and as Gower was, that is just an added little thing. It's an added bonus and shouldn't be ignored.
Yeah, I mean, Bumble, twice our age, Bumble, so he's seen a lot more than us. He says KP, he's a massive Peterson. Yeah. He says Peterson's the best he's ever seen. I wonder if he's changed his mind in the last year or so. I guess KP was a bit more box office, wasn't he? He was a bit more, you didn't know quite what to expect. Those dumb slog millionaire moments that Bob Willis used to talk about were never too far away, but so were the reverse switch hits and all those wonderful shots that he played. He did absolutely empty bars, Kevin Peterson. Gooch and Gower, for me, as you say, were the two I grew up either playing with or watching. You'll struggle to find a better player than Root. And also, as a bloke, and how we started this podcast discussing test matches and crowds and selling the game, Joe Root does his best to sell the game. As a person, the way he talks, the way he acts on a cricket field, he smiles. If you play with a smile on your face, all those people rocking up and watching go, well, this looks good fun. I might give this a go. He makes cricket, which I never made it look fun. And I at times hated the game. He has continued that love of the game. And long may he continue. He's always very good with us, the media. He gives us a lot of time before and after games. He spoke to you for a long time on Thorpe before Old Trafford. He came at the end. He's, the fact that he's getting hundreds every other day, he has to come down and do the press. But I can very rarely remember us asking for Joe Root and someone saying, no, Joe's not doing it. And people might think, well, why is that important? But he's got to try and sell the game as well. And I think he does that as well as anyone.
Seamlessly, that takes us into this week's guest, because Joe Root is only one of 4 batters down the years who have scored 100 in each innings of a Lord's Test match. Graham Gooch did it. Michael Vaughan did it. Joe Root has just done it. And our guest this week is the grandson of the great George Headley, who did it way back in 1939. So Dean Headley, one of our great mates from the 90s, has joined us. It's an absolute pleasure to see you, Dino. And I just referred to the family history there, which is a remarkable one. Only 2 families which have got 3 consecutive generations that have played Test cricket: Jahangir Khan, Majid Khan, Bazid Khan, and of course your family, the great George Headley. Ron, not quite so great, but did play Test cricket. And you, of course, who played 15 tests for England and a number of ODIs. It's a great story. When we were chatting about this podcast, organising you to come on it, I asked you how old you were when George died, and I think you said you were 13. So you did meet him before he died. What are your memories of the great man?
I think I was bigger than him by the time I was 11. So he was very small, about probably 5'7". The height must have come from my dad's mother's side, which I think it did. But yeah, he was just it's really weird having a granddad where everybody else knows him more than you do. So the stories of he was very humble. He was very pro the modern player. Yeah, and just very, very kind to people. So people like Jimmy Adams speak about him and Courtney. And yeah, there's some great stories out of Jamaica. You know, him queuing to get in, and then some bloke says, "You're the great George Headley," and he went, didn't say anything. And then the bloke went, "Nobody go in until he gets in."
There's a weird connection here because as we chatted about, my wife's grandfather, who's called Frank de Carey's, his first Test match, he batted with your granddad. They put on 150, I think, in
that's right.
innings. So this is way back in 1930. But I think if anybody was to name maybe 10 of the greatest batters of all time, your granddad would be in everybody's list. I mean, he's just regarded as, one of the greats of all time. So dare I ask, what happened? What happened? Where did the batting genes go?
Listen, I couldn't be the best batter and bowler in the family, so I just had to pick one. Both bat in the top three, and I going back in the bottom three. No, yeah, I did all right with the bat, but I remember you, Nasser, on an England A-team tour, giving me batting tips, and then Shoaib Akhtar came in. I played my bat pad with my bat, missed the ball, and then you were just laughing as I came back in. Brilliant.
You were a very solid night watchman. That's all I would say. We pushed you out that door. No backlift at all. You were like the Hoggard school of backlift. Get past that.
Yeah, but that's the way the game was, though. It was like, because I had a decent technique, as captains always said, you've got to like bat for the batter. So I batted a load of time, didn't score any runs, and I wish my better innings were a little bit more positive. So
you'd have done well under McCullum.
Exactly, Nas.
Other than your fantastic performances, and of course, I think we all remember that great bowling performance at Melbourne when we won there, and you take 6 for, I think, in the second innings. Yeah, my overriding funny memory of you is when you had that no ball problem in Barbados or in the West Indies, and you and Bumble worked together at the Wanderers to work on
So over-exaggerated.
He put down this white box in paint, and your right foot had to hit this right box. And come the match, Bumble is looking through with the binoculars, and you're running in. He's missed the box. No ball called. Happy memories of an interesting tour, actually, that '98 tour.
Well, better than the Hampshire game. I forgot I forgot whether I started on my left foot or my right foot, which caused me, because you do so many things naturally, and then suddenly you go, which foot? And Graham Cowdery dropped a slip catch about 4 balls later, which I was so annoyed at because he was laughing at previous. Very annoying.
Have you got any family memorabilia of George before we move on to more current matters? Have you got anything that in your house about the great man?
Yeah, so my dad's got some, as a family thing, we've got some, his Order of Distinction, his MBE, things like that. But yeah, I've been moving house recently and I've found loads of stuff. I found Tom Graveney's jumper. Found something from Pelly, Ben Hollyoak the other day. Just amazing the stuff that you get. But yeah, over the time, some great pictures of my dad playing. There's a brilliant picture of in 1976 at Old Hill, and he looks like Reservoir Dogs. Viv's got the gloves on. My dad's leading. There's Vanny behind. It's a black and white photo. You've got Roy Fredericks. You've got Andy Roberts, and it's just an amazing photo. And that day, the West Indies brought a whole team in 1976 with that hot summer. And they played at Old Hill, and they think there's 10,000 people there. And they brought their full team to play at Old Hill. It was amazing.
Well, it is an amazing family story that you have, and a brilliant connection, of course, with one of the greatest players of all time. But another of the reasons we wanted to get you on was because of Josh Hull, who you know well, He suddenly
Yep.
emerged from nowhere, really, to be picked in England's Test squad and ODI squad and T20 squad. So one of the few that's been picked across formats. He's not yet played, but one imagines it won't be long before he does. And you have coached at Stanford School for a number of years. That's where Josh Hull emerged from. So you must know him well, and you must have some insight into him.
Yeah, he's 6'7". He's got size 15 feet or something. He finds it hard to get bowling boots. He's strong, like farmer's stock strong. Very coachable. You know, he's got a massive appetite to be able to. Well, he's got a massive appetite as well, but an appetite to. He does. He eats like no tomorrow. I think he's still growing, to be honest. But he's quiet. I think he's very confident in himself, but quietly, because it's quite an amazing story, really, because he wasn't really playing mixed age group cricket until under 18. Northants had overlooked him, and then through Ali Maiden, we got him moved just before Christmas to Leicester. Didn't feel it was right to put him on the academy straight away, so waited till after Christmas, got put on the academy, and then he signed his professional contract in September. So, I mean, he was playing schoolboy cricket, and then he played some academy and second team at under 18 level, and then 18 months later, he's in all three England squads.
How do you think, as a person, you know him as a person, sometimes all that attention and everyone's talking about you can affect you. Am I good enough, etc. You're suddenly in a dressing room with Stokes and McCullum and Root. I mean, Broady noticed he hadn't moved from that balcony until he went out to field late on day 4. He had the prime spot on that balcony. But how will the attention affect someone the boy from nowhere story, really?
I think he's pretty level-headed. He's coped with a lot already, Nas. His first game for Leicester was a first-class game, playing against people like Shah Massoud. And so, you know, Milan, I think he got out. So his 4-day stats are not great, but it's a small sample size. But I think this regime is picking, you know, they're trying to be clever with what they're doing. And I think up till now, they have. You go to India, they picked a 6'4" off spinner because they wanted bounce. That worked. And I think they're looking ahead and going, look, we don't want to take 6 foot bowlers to Australia. We want to take tall bowlers. His left arm. Will it work? I think there's every chance it will. Look, Test cricket's much more skillful game in the sense of consistency. It really tests how consistent you are with your technique. I think he's already quite good at T20, but it's a little bit more rock, paper, scissors, bowl variations, a little bit of luck here and there. So he's done really well. He's closed out the game in the Metro Bank. This year he's closed out, you know, I think at Worcester he bowled a no ball in the last over, still closed the game out. They've gone to him with pressure situations, and he's only 18 months into professional cricket.
We were chatting a little bit about Josh on our podcast last week, and because that's when the selection happened, and wondering whether, not saying this will be the case with him, but whether in certain circumstances selection can come too soon. You mentioned his first class stats and his numbers generally, which, you know, he's not played many games. His wickets have come at a high average. So he's obviously still learning. His body is still probably growing and changing. And as you know, injuries can happen to bowlers as they're going through that. Do you think there is a danger sometimes that people could be picked too soon? And would you be confident that that's not the case with him?
No, I don't think you 100% you can be confident. I think maybe we used to pick too late. We used to, after the horses bolted, then pick people and they're out of form. Look, this kid's got all the attributes. You know, Bashir's the same. You know, people look at him, he doesn't average this, but, you know, they've obviously worked with him enough and they haven't just picked him out of the blue. They must have been watching him for the last year. As soon as he came on the scene, and monitored how he was doing. I don't think this regime would have picked this lad, Headley, if they felt that he wouldn't be able to do it. Now, the question is, they're 2-0 up. Will they play him against Sri Lanka? I personally would, because I think you've got to find out now. You can't wait till, put him in against Australia. Give him a chance. He's got bounce, probably will and
You'll get him for free tickets if he plays, will you?
Well, yeah, I've already had one, to be fair. But yeah, no, he's a level-headed lad, and I think that he's got all the attributes. He's got a really easy, repeatable action, but he's going to have to learn quickly. And at that level, to play red ball, it is, you've got to be on top of your skills.
And they say he can get quicker. Do you feel that? I mean, he's still developing physically. And just for any young bowlers out there, I've heard this week a little bit. Oh, we picked him because he's not rapid at the moment, but he can get quicker. How do you get quicker?
I don't think that's a science either. People keep saying you can build fast bowlers, but if you could, why aren't they? You look at all the best bowlers in the world. They've got some attributes throughout history, but they've all got slightly curve run up, straight run up. There's a lot of people talking about, there's a set way. I think there's attributes, and some bowlers have 4 attributes, some have 7, some just have 1, but they can still bowl quick. So my pace didn't come on till 23. So I was quite sharp. Oh, you would have played against me when I was like young at Middlesex, but I was quite sharp. But in 6 months, I went from, say, bowling 80 with a change up to 85 to bowling 85 with a change up to 90.
And what brought that about?
I think people have different maturation rates. I think it's completely mad that we're looking at 18-year-olds.
Well, that's actually another topic that we wanted to get into, because you mentioned that Joshua was not put on the academy immediately, had to wait a little bit.
No. So he was with Northants when he was under 17, not playing that much.
Yeah.
But the only reason why he didn't get put on the academy straight away, because he was moving to a new club and he just needed to settle in.
Cool. But he broadly a later developer than some.
Yeah.
And you've talked there about your pace coming quite late, later when you're a few years into your professional career. You're coaching at a school, so you see young players up to probably 17, 18 when they finish at your school. And there are fewer avenues now, aren't there, for later developers? County clubs are generally making their decision on their academy players when they're 18, and they'll say yes or no. Not everybody is ready at 18. But back in the day when we played, there were more avenues. There was the Bain Clarkson under-25 competition. Minor counties cricket, I would say, was probably a better link between there and the first-class game than it is now. There are 1 or 2 avenues now, like the South Asian Cricket Academy, from which players are going into there and going to county clubs a little bit later in their mid-20s. But do you think there are enough avenues for the later developers right now?
Absolutely not. So when you look at, I did a thing called Walkers and Talkers at Somerset today, and they showed me my Kent side from 1995. The youngest player was 25 in the team. County sides aren't like that anymore. You've lost the England players out with contracts. You're not getting the best overseas players generally. I'm not saying that all overseas players, but you're not getting the creme de la creme. There's not one playing in the second team. So the gap between second team and first team is getting huge. And then also now you've got a situation where I'm working in a school, I work at Blundell School, and you've got a situation where they're asking 18-year-olds to be playing second team cricket now, because now they'll say it's because to develop them. I think a lot of the time it's because they won't pay the £150 a day that you got to pay a trialist now. And so 5 years ago, you weren't getting hassled to let your under 18s go, but now you are. And they're saying it's about development, but then, you've been asked to release a player in June, and you say, well, can't they play the next game? And they go, oh, no, we haven't got one till September. It can't be that important, can it? So my point being is that, one, I think that with the restrictions of pay, I mean, I've even been told now that you've got to pay net bowlers to come in. Now, for me, I'm going, I just want opportunity as a young player. You know, any young player that I come across, I know a 19-year-old at the moment, won't mention his name. He scored runs in the Super Fours last year as an 18-year-old because he just got onto the academy then. He got 200s. He didn't get picked up. He's got 100 against Kent this year in the warm-up games to the 50 overs. He's got another 100 in minor counties, and he can't get a second team game. Why? Because people haven't got the budget. So they're playing 18-year-old, which then the knock-on effect then is that your second team's getting more diluted. So therefore, the gap between second team and first team is even more. If there's ever a stage now, if there's ever a stage now to have an MCC ground staff or organisations like that, like you've got the Root Academy, they've got a thing in Australia. You've got Darren Liebman Academy. Our kids are spending money to go to academies overseas to stay in the game. And yet they can't volunteer to go and play cricket here, which is mad.
You're obviously very, very passionate about this subject. Is it a financial thing, or are they just making their mind up on players too soon? And hence, once you've made your mind up, you almost have to, I go and watch my son play club cricket, and there's a lot of very good players playing in the Essex League. And I'm thinking, crikey, how have they missed this one? If they then suddenly go, oh, we're going to go back to this lad, they're almost saying we got it wrong a couple of years ago. So are they making their mind up too soon?
Well, it's not just 18. So you're talking about opportunity. So yes, somebody's been in your pathway for a long time. Got relationships. You've got a subconscious bias towards that player. So a player comes in, well, you've known a player for 5 minutes and you've known a player for 5 years. Which side of the fence do you go? And the safer side is to go with the player that you've known for 5 years, because what if I get the 5-minute call wrong? So Rishi Patel, he moved from Essex to Leicester. We played against him for the PCA. He hit Min Patel for 6, like Carl Hooper did defence. And then it went, and I didn't see that coming. Unbelievable. Told Nico had a look at him, and that's how he ended up at Leicester. I just find that
the one thing we would all agree is that players do mature at different rates. Nas played for England at 21. We were probably early starters and quite advanced cricketers by a young age. But take Andrew Strauss, for example, who by his own admission was not a kind of what he would call a fully formed professional cricketer until 26, 27.
But he wouldn't even play today.
Yeah. So I think,
I was 21 when I made my debut. I'm playing in a Kent. So I ask people all the time, because it's not just plucking this out of the air. Mark Elam, 20, first class debut, not playing for England, first class debut.
Mm.
When you're best cricketers in the world, without a doubt, Australia's test team now is all over 30. They haven't got one player. So they're quite happy to be aging, but not one player under 30. This is an maturing game. And I was talking to, I hadn't spoken to him for ages, Carl Hooper. And he works with he works with Adelaide, South Australia. And he says in Australia, they're now running proper, they're looking for these 19 to 24-year-olds. They run coaching.
The classic example is KP. We played against Durban, and he played as a 18-year-old and batted at number 9, got me and you out. And within however many years, a couple of years later, he's batting at number 4. And we've just named him on our list of all-time great England batters. He'd be in the top 4 all-time great England batters. And when we played against him, I don't know how old he was, KP, on that, when we played him for England against Durban. but he was batting number 9. And Dean is absolutely right. People develop at different ages, and don't kick them out the system too soon.
Quite a nice story this week, actually. Young Jaffa Chowan, who picked up a Big Bash contract. To somebody, I've known him and his family a long time because he played Middlesex age group pathway with my lad exactly the same year. And, eventually found his way to Yorkshire through various avenues, but finally with the South Asian Cricket Academy, got 100 gig, not this year, but last year. And has just been picked up in the Big Bash. He'd be an example of somebody who, had to find an avenue into the game. So I suppose the message from this is that the more avenues there are for the later developers and those who mature later, the better. I think that's a simple.
But also, you've also got to think at 18 as well. A county's asking, they have to sign them at 20 grand or something like that. Look, if I was 18 leaving school now and somebody offered me, and look, I've never earned any money. If somebody offered me accommodation, so at least I've got accommodation, and offered me £1,000 a month, I'd bite their hand off. And I'll tell you what, they could give it me for just 6 months, and I'd bite your hand off.
What you're saying is that work employment rules at the moment don't allow.
If we've got 3 players we're unsure about, none of them are getting signed at the moment. If we've got 3 players that we know that, a Josh Hull or whatever, then we're signing them at 20k. But what about all the players who just need that time to stay? Because otherwise you're going to end up in the West Indies sort of thing where there's nowhere to go after 18. So when you say some sort of system, there is no system after 18 now, because I can go and play for a university at 18 for a 3-day game for free, but I can't walk down the road and go and play for Leicester or Derby for 3 days at my own. I can go and volunteer to work in a coffee shop or wherever, but I can't go and play cricket. I mean, the world's gone mad. And yet these people, they're just restricting these opportunities. I agree that you shouldn't be exploited. So maybe it's 10 days where you're just given normal expenses like food and whatever. And after 10 days, it ramps up to £40 a day, then goes to £80 a day. The more days, every 5 days, it goes up another level. But I can tell you, if I saw a player for 10 days, I'd tell you whether I want him or not.
That's enough. Enough of an opportunity. I wondered, Nas, a reflection on Dino, the bowler there. I mean, somebody I loved captaining and loved having in my side, and you the same?
Absolutely. I mean, I've often said about us selecting on character, we changed, didn't we, from stats to character, and the man in the middle here, we all got glasses on. We've all aged a little bit. But
you haven't got too many.
Dean had the biggest heart. He had that, and I was lucky. We had them in Gough and Caddick and Headley in your bowlers. He had the biggest heart. He would bowl all day for you. I noticed the other day when we were talking about bowlers going round the wicket and the England bowlers struggling to go round the wicket, you tweeted about the art and skill of going round the wicket, and you were absolutely fantastic at that against left-handers. It was your biggest asset, and some of the best left-handers there were in the game back then. So it's just a shame. I was going to ask you, when you reflect on your career, what was it, 15 test matches? Could you have done anything different, or the body just fell apart on you, Dean?
It's 14 really. I mean, because we didn't. I had a really good game in Sabina Park where I didn't bat bowl.
That was the abandoned match.
I don't know whether you two got out.
Nearly pushed you out of the door as a night watchman on that occasion, or the end of game watchman.
Well, I was hiding behind Tuffers. Tuffers is already quaking in underneath the benches in the dressing room, and this was after 1 minute that seeing Ambrose bowl. It's the only time I've seen 2 fast bowlers slow down to keep the game on. But no.
How do you look back on your career, Dean?
No regrets. Look, we bowled a lot, so I was broken by the time I got to 29. But there were reasons for that. On that 18 tour that you captained and we first met, and there was one game. I think I bowled 35% of the competitive overs on that tour.
I broke
So
you.
it's
Is what you're
nasty to
saying.
you.
Yeah,
Joe
you
did
broke
to
me,
your
Nasser.
front,
You broke me. But you know, look, not many people play for England. I'm proud of what I've done. I think my granddad used to sign, and Michael Holden will tell you this. He used to sign, play cricket, and travel the world. And I think the greatest thing that cricket's ever given me is I've met a lot of people, and I've travelled the world.
That's a good note to finish on, I think. And just a reminder of what a remarkable story it is. George Headley, Ron Headley, and Dean Headley, only one of two families to have played 3 successive generations of Test cricket. Thanks for joining us, Dean. Good luck. I hope Josh plays at the Oval so you can hoover in for some free tickets and free hospitality. I noticed that when we invited you up to the commentary box the other day at Lord's, you politely declined. I reckon you've been on it for most of the afternoon.
Well, basically, you have to get me in the morning if I'm at Test cricket. Nasser knew that. I did politely tell you that I was on my way. I heard nothing, and then I missed something from you. I was taken into lunch when you messaged me, Athers, and then I said probably not best at this time.
That was that was different. That was completely flipped from when you used to play, wasn't it? We couldn't get you in the morning.
Yeah. No. I learned very quickly with cricket, always go in looking not very good, so nobody ever knew when you were out or not.
Great to see you as ever, Dean. Thanks for joining us. Let's hope Josh Hull has a long and distinguished career. Nas, we will have a podcast, no doubt, on the far side of the final Test at the Oval. We're both. I'll see you tomorrow at Thorpe's funeral, which is at the Cathedral in Southwark, which will be a sombre affair, but hopefully a part celebration of the life of a wonderful cricketer as well.